So what is meant by action potential? What is meant by potential? Ability. Action potential. Action which is given to perform the potential. Okay. So where you will see about this action potential specifically? What are the structures? Neurons, skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles. Okay. So this is what is the classic graphical picture of a action potential. Okay, so before going to the action potential, first we will see the normal state of a cell in relation with the charges. Okay, so this is the normal axon. Usually inside of the cell will be negative. It is due to leakage of potassium from inside to outside or from outside to inside. Inside to outside. Potassium is a positive ion. Through the leaky channels, potassium leaky channels, there is a continuous exit of potassium. So always the inside of the cell lacks the positivity, and this state is called as polarized state. The polarized state, inside of the cell is negative and outside of the cell will be positive. Okay, so this always gives rise to the local current flow from positive to the negative voltage. So this is the normal polarized state. And if the inside becomes positive and outside becomes negative in the presence of a stimulus, that is called as depolarized. From the normal polarized state, the cell is getting deviated. That is called as depolarized. And this depolarization is required for the action potential to reach the peak. Okay, so that is called as the peak potential. Once when this action potential undergoes depolarization process, that is the time where the signal transmission is taking place. Okay, clear? And now the resting membrane potential, we have seen it is through the leakage of potassium ion from inside to the outside. Okay, and see here during the resting membrane potential maintenance, that is the cell is polarized, and here the voltage dependent sodium channel is closed. So there is no movement of sodium either from inside to outside or from outside to inside. Both is closed because the channel is remaining closed. When this resting membrane potential getting the stimulus, excitation, what happens? Still the potassium is there. Leakage of potassium is taking place, but the sodium channel is open in the presence of stimulus, that is called as excitation. The polarized state is getting deviated. So you term it as a depolarized condition, depolarization. So what happens? Inside of the cell becomes positive and outside becomes negative. But still the potassium, potassium is going out. How the outside is becoming negative? Because when you give 2 molecules of potassium, here 3 molecules of sodium is coming inside. So there is a compensation of extra 1 molecule of sodium that makes the internal of the cell as a positive, and that is the mechanism which is making the depolarization to happen. Once when it is getting depolarized, here the cell is undergoing the action potential, the peak threshold stimulus, giving this peak potential to reach. And once when it overshoots, once when it has reached the action potential, immediately what happens? The sodium channel closed. So what happens? There is no movement of positive ion inside the cell. Again, the positivity is lost inside the cell. So the depolarized condition, returning back to the polarized state. So that is what you call it as repolarization, returning back to the polarized condition because of the closing of the sodium channel. Immediately once when it reaches, here it is open, the sodium channel. Once when it has reached the peak potential, sodium channel is closed. Okay, so once when it is closed, immediately it will fall down to the normal resting potential. And here what happens, still there is exit of potassium leaky channels. So along with this closage of sodium and still the removal of potassium, there is a chance for the cell to undergo more polarized than the normal state. So that is what you are calling as hyperpolarized. So it is getting negative more than that of the normal resting state because of the pressure difference. Immediately once when the sodium channel is closed and still the potassium leaky channel is giving the positive ion out, and there is no movement of sodium as a positive ion inside, the cell becomes more and more polarized than the normal resting state. So that is called as hyperpolarized. Once when it is balanced, immediately it will come back to the polarized state. Okay, so this is the action potential in general. There is a difference in the action potential from the skeletal muscle to the cardiac muscle. What is the difference? Action potential between the neuron, skeletal muscle and the cardiac muscle. What is the significance in the action potential of a cardiac muscle? Will it be in the same feature? What is the thing? What is this? Plateau phase. Why this plateau phase is maintained? Okay. Why you need this plateau phase? Because the cardiac muscles has to contract continuously as like skeletal muscles, neurons. Only when there is a stimulus. The cardiac muscle cannot wait for the stimulus. It is having a continuous signal input through the conducting system. What is the conducting system of the heart? What are the structures? SA node, AV node, bundle of His, Purkinje fibers. It is having its own excitation process. It is having its own impulse generation through the junctional tissues of the heart. Okay, in detail of this, we will see in the cardiovascular system. Okay, I will explain you in detail about this plateau phase and this action potential in the cardiovascular system. So just now, for the time being, you know, this is deviated from the cardiac muscle. This is with the neuron and the skeletal muscle. Okay, so this picture will tell you the channels opening and closing. If you want, you can use this for the reference to remember the events which is happening. So in here, in the presence of a stimulus, the sodium channel opens and still the potassium channel begins to leave the cell. And once when it has reached the potential, the closage of the sodium channel, still the potassium channel is a leaky channel always. It is being leaked. Whether it is polarized, depolarized, repolarized, it will never consider it because it is a leaky channel. Okay. And then finally the potassium channel closes when it reaches the hyperpolarized state. And then it will return back to the normal level. This hyperpolarized state is due to excess of potassium which is diffuses away from the cell. Okay, clear with this? Okay, and now coming to the saltatory conduction. Saltatory conduction is specifically in the case of a neuron. So this is the structure of the neuron where you have the cell body, the dendrites and the axon, and this is axon terminal. Okay, the structure of axon is covered with the myelin sheaths. The myelin sheath is not a continuous way. So you have nodes, internodes in between. So in this case of neuron, the signal transmission will take place from jumping of one node of Ranvier to the another. So that makes the nerve signal to travel faster in the neuron, especially in the myelinated nerve fibers. There will be fast movement of the signals because of the saltatory conduction. This is called the jumping of potential from one node to the another. Okay, just remember this concept, saltatory condition in the case of myelinated nerve fibers.